It's February 9, 2004. The White Mountains of New Hampshire stand cold and unforgiving under a sheet of snow. The roads are quiet, the kind of quiet that feels uneasy, as if something's about to go wrong. At 7:27 p.m., a black satin sedan slides off Route 112 near Haverhill. The car is damaged but still intact, its airbags deployed. Inside, there's no one. No driver. No footprints leading away. Just an eerie stillness hanging in the winter air. A nearby resident, an elderly woman named Faith Westman, peers out her window and dials 911. She reports seeing a young woman, possibly injured, standing next to the car. But by the time the first officer arrives, just minutes later, that woman is gone. And that's where the mystery begins. Maura Murray was 21 years old, a nursing student at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Bright, ambitious, and fiercely independent. But in the days leading up to her disappearance, something in her life seemed to fracture. On February 7th, she received a phone call while working her campus security shift. Whatever she heard left her in tears. Her supervisor later described her as completely shocked, almost frozen. The next day, she searched online for directions to Burlington, Vermont, and rental condos in the White Mountains. By February 9th, she emailed her professors saying she'd be out of town due to a family emergency. There was no such emergency. She packed her car with clothes, toiletries, textbooks, and a box of wine. Then, without telling anyone where she was going, she drove north. At 7:27 p.m., the accident happened. At 7:46 p.m., police arrived. By then, Maura was gone. Her cell phone, credit cards, and bank accounts were never used again. No trace of her has ever been found. But here's where the story begins to twist. The responding officer, Cecil Smith, noted that the car was locked. A box of wine was found inside, with some spilled on the driver's side. A rag had been stuffed into the tailpipe, a detail that has puzzled investigators for years. Smith searched the area. Neighbors said they hadn't seen anyone walk away. A school bus driver, Butch Atwood, claimed he stopped to check on her minutes before the police arrived. He said Maura looked shaken but insisted she'd already called AAA, which was impossible. There was no record of any call. It's as if she vanished between the sound of an engine cooling and the sweep of a patrol car's headlights. Later, investigators found no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading into the woods, and no indication she'd been picked up. Search dogs tracked her scent for only about 100 feet, then lost it in the middle of the road. Some say she ran away to start a new life. Others believe she was abducted. And then, there's the theory that she met with foul play not far from that lonely bend on Route 112. But there's something else, something almost hidden in plain sight. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Maura's behavior had shifted dramatically. She'd been involved in a minor car accident just days earlier, using her father's car and causing several $1,000s in damage. That night, she and her father argued, though neither ever said what it was about. 2 days later, she disappeared. So what was she running from? And what, or who, was waiting for her in the mountains? 2 days after the accident with her father's car, Maura's actions grew even stranger. On the morning of February 9th, she withdrew $280 from an ATM, nearly all the cash she had left in her account. Security footage showed her alone, wearing a dark jacket and a ponytail, glancing toward the camera just once before walking away. She then went to a nearby liquor store and bought a small selection of alcohol, Bailey's Irish Cream, Kahlua, vodka, and a box of Franzia wine. The cashier remembered her as polite, calm, and quiet. Nothing about her seemed rushed or distressed. But later, when police checked her dorm room, they found it eerily clean. Her bed was neatly made. Boxes were stacked. And on top of them lay a printed email to her boyfriend, Billy Roche, that began with the words "I love you more stud," but hinted at tension and distance between them. It was as if she'd been preparing to leave for good, or for something she couldn't explain. At around 4:30 p.m., she left the UMass campus in her black satin sedan. Her exact destination was never confirmed. Cell tower pings later suggested she was heading toward the White Mountains of New Hampshire, a region she'd been to many times with her family. It was a place she knew. A place where she might have felt safe. Around 7 p.m., a witness saw her car traveling west on Route 112, a winding rural road surrounded by trees and snowbanks. 10 minutes later, that same car was found crashed into a snowbank, facing the wrong direction. The front end was badly damaged, and the airbags had deployed. The scene appeared calm. No signs of a violent collision. It looked like a simple slide-off caused by icy roads. But when police began to piece together the details, the timeline began to fracture. The first 911 call came at 7:27 p.m. The woman who placed it said she saw someone walking around the car. Another neighbor claimed he saw the same car but no one near it. Minutes later, a local school bus driver named Butch Atwood pulled over to help. He said Maura was standing by the driver's side door, shivering but refusing assistance. He described her as polite, soft-spoken, and insistent that she'd already called for roadside help. Atwood offered to phone the police anyway, but she asked him not to. When he left to call 911 from his house, he looked back. The car's interior lights were still on. He estimated only a few minutes passed before Officer Cecil Smith arrived. But when Smith reached the scene, Maura was gone. The car was locked. The keys were missing. The rag was still in the tailpipe. And the snow around the car was untouched, no footprints leading away, no sign of someone running or walking. Smith radioed for backup and searched the area with a flashlight. Nothing. The next morning, a full-scale search was launched. Police, firefighters, and volunteers combed the woods with dogs and snowmobiles. A scent dog followed Maura's trail from the car but lost it abruptly about 100 feet down the road, right in the middle of the pavement. It was as if she had vanished into thin air or had been picked up by another vehicle. Investigators checked every lead they could find. There were no confirmed sightings that night, no strange tire tracks nearby, no sign she had tried to hitchhike. Her family was notified the next day, and within hours, the story began to ripple through the news. A young, promising nursing student gone without a trace. Her father, Fred Murray, drove straight to New Hampshire and began his own desperate search. He told reporters, "Someone took her. She didn't just walk away." Over time, the theories multiplied. Some believed Maura had chosen to disappear, to escape school, relationship stress, or a possible mental breakdown. Others pointed to the strange details, the fake email about a family emergency, the packed car, the hidden rag in the tailpipe. It didn't add up to a clean getaway. It looked like fear. There was also a haunting rumor that a man living near the crash site had ties to criminal activity and may have seen her that night. Police investigated but found no proof. Still, something about that road, the darkness, the isolation, felt wrong. In the weeks that followed, search teams found nothing. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a phone, not even a trace of blood. It was as if Maura had stepped out of reality itself. Friends described her as adventurous but sometimes impulsive. She had secrets, like anyone her age. But there was no indication she wanted to vanish forever. What made the case more chilling was that 2 days after Maura disappeared, another young woman went missing just 30 miles away under strikingly similar circumstances. Her name was Brianna Maitland. She was found with her car backed into an abandoned building, also with no trace of her. 2 disappearances, 2 cars, 2 young women, within the same small region. Coincidence, or something darker? The FBI later dismissed any official connection, but to those who followed the case, the pattern was impossible to ignore. What if Maura didn't crash by accident? What if someone was waiting for her that night? What if she didn't leave that scene alone? The deeper investigators dug, the stranger it became. Phone records showed her last call was made just before she left Amherst, a short conversation with a friend about travel plans. Then, silence. Her credit cards and bank account were never touched again. The liquor she bought was left behind, unopened, except for the spilled wine in the car. Every lead ended in a dead end. Every clue dissolved into speculation. The White Mountains became a silent witness to something no one could see. And through it all, her family kept searching, driving those same icy roads, hoping for a sign. What happened to Maura Murray on that cold February night remains one of the most unsettling questions in modern true crime. But the truth, if it exists, might not be buried in snow. It might be hidden in what she was running from. As days turned into weeks, the search for Maura intensified, yet every effort only deepened the mystery. Her father, Fred Murray, refused to believe she had simply walked away. He retraced her route, driving from Amherst to the crash site over and over, hoping to find something the police had missed. Volunteers scoured the woods for miles in every direction, but the landscape yielded nothing. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle. Even with helicopters, scent dogs, and thermal imaging, Maura seemed to have vanished beyond the limits of explanation. The investigation soon began to focus on the timeline before she disappeared. In the months leading up to February, Maura's life had quietly begun to unravel. She had been cited for using a stolen credit card number to order food, though the case was minor and expected to be dismissed. There were also whispers of problems in her relationship with her boyfriend, Billy Roche, who was stationed at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Their emails hinted at strain, jealousy, and confusion. On the day of the crash, Billy was trying to reach her repeatedly, unaware that her phone would soon fall silent forever. Investigators found that Maura had printed out directions to multiple destinations in New Hampshire and Vermont. Her car was packed with personal items but also signs of disorganization: books, toiletries, and a stuffed toy she'd had since childhood. It looked like a road trip, not an escape. Yet no one knew why she was going north alone. On February 11th, 2 days after she disappeared, her father stood in front of the press and pleaded, "If you have my daughter, please let her go. If you've seen her, please call." His voice trembled, his hands shaking from cold and exhaustion. Behind him, snow fell softly, blanketing the spot where she'd last been seen. Over the following weeks, the police began to theorize. One possibility was that Maura had become intoxicated after the crash and wandered into the woods, succumbing to the freezing temperatures. But the search teams had combed that area dozens of times, and no trace was found. Another theory suggested she might have been picked up by a stranger, either voluntarily or against her will. But the road was sparsely traveled, and in those few minutes between Atwood leaving and the officer's arrival, the window for such an encounter was incredibly small. Then came the anonymous tips. A woman called police claiming to have seen a person matching Maura's description walking east on Route 112 that same night. Another said she'd seen a red pickup truck parked nearby. None of these sightings could be confirmed, but they added to the sense that something darker had unfolded in that small, silent town. The case soon began attracting attention online. Amateur sleuths, journalists, and digital detectives dissected every detail, every word of the police reports, every photo of the crash site. Some believed Maura had planned her disappearance meticulously, possibly due to emotional turmoil or fear of an impending breakdown. Others believed the evidence pointed to foul play. The rag in the tailpipe remained one of the most bizarre details. Some speculated that Maura had used it to prevent smoke from attracting attention after her car began leaking oil, a trick her father had once mentioned. Others believed it was a sign that someone else had tampered with the car, someone who knew what they were doing. As time passed, the lack of progress began to weigh on her family. Fred continued to search every month, walking miles through snow and forest trails, posting flyers, talking to locals, refusing to give up. Her sister Kathleen publicly admitted that the family was struggling to cope with the lack of closure. Even Maura's boyfriend traveled to New Hampshire to join the search, leaving emotional voicemails that would later be made public, his voice cracking with desperation, "Maura, please pick up. We just want to know you're okay." Despite multiple searches and new leads, the trail always ended in silence. Then, in 2006, 2 years after her disappearance, a local man claimed that his dog had discovered something in the woods near the crash site. Police investigated but found nothing of value. Every new tip became another dead end. Over the years, interest in Maura's case grew beyond anyone's expectations. It became one of the first major mysteries to be dissected by the online true crime community. Forums, documentaries, and podcasts tried to make sense of it, but each new theory only added another layer of confusion. Some argued that Maura was suffering from depression and wanted to start over somewhere far away, perhaps in Canada or under a new identity. Others pointed to inconsistencies in witness statements and claimed a cover-up or a missed suspect in the early investigation. Police, however, maintained that there was no evidence of foul play. Yet even among investigators, the uncertainty lingered. Years later, retired officers admitted that the case still haunted them. They had searched harder and wider than in almost any other missing person case in the state, yet it felt like she had stepped into a void. One of them said, "It's like she walked into the woods and the world just closed behind her." For Maura's family, that void never closed. Her father kept pushing for renewed investigations, pressing authorities to dig deeper, to search specific properties near the crash site that he believed held answers. But warrants were denied, and time kept moving. As anniversaries passed, the same questions returned. Why did she leave that day? Why that road? Why no trace, no sound, no clue? Over the years, small pieces of possible evidence surfaced. Bones found in nearby woods, reported sightings in Canada or Vermont, but each one was ruled out. Every discovery that offered hope ended in disappointment. The deeper the case was examined, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a disappearance, it was a story tangled in human emotion, isolation, and fear. Somewhere in the details, between the crash, the missing minutes, and the silence, lies a truth no one has been able to uncover. And as each year passes, the mystery of what happened to Maura Murray grows colder, darker, and more haunting. Years passed, and the case of Maura Murray became less about evidence and more about obsession. For her family, it was a constant ache, a question that never stopped echoing through sleepless nights. Her father aged visibly, still returning to that same stretch of Route 112, standing in the snow, staring down the road as if waiting for her car to appear again out of the darkness. He said once in an interview, "I can't leave this earth until I bring my daughter home." But time had a way of erasing traces, of softening the edges of memory. The house where she crashed was sold, the road repaved, trees grew taller where search parties once stood. Yet the story refused to fade. Each year, new faces joined the search online, people who had never known Maura, yet felt as though they did. They analyzed the accident photos, mapped out her last phone calls, even retraced her drive from Amherst, trying to understand her state of mind in those final hours. Some believed she was escaping something more personal than anyone realized, a life that had begun to feel too heavy, too fragile. Others were convinced that someone along that lonely mountain road saw her, stopped for her, and took her. There was also the chilling detail of a nearby property that became the center of renewed suspicion years later. Cadaver dogs once alerted near the foundation of an old house close to the crash site. It gave her family a brief surge of hope, but when ground-penetrating radar was brought in, nothing was found. Another dead end. Another wound reopened. Maura's siblings grew older, some started families of their own, but they never stopped talking about her, never stopped searching. They described her as funny, athletic, stubborn, and full of life. Not the kind of person who would simply vanish without leaving a trace. Not the kind of person who would choose to be forgotten. Over time, new technologies emerged, DNA databases, advanced search algorithms, even true crime documentaries that reignited public interest. Yet despite all the attention, the facts remained unchanged. A 21-year-old woman left her dorm, drove north, and disappeared on a cold February night. That's all anyone could prove. Everything else lived in the gray space between evidence and imagination. In one of her father's last interviews, his voice soft but unwavering, he said, "I still believe she's out there somewhere. Maybe she's gone, but she's not lost. Somebody knows something. Somebody always knows." The haunting part was how much that road seemed to hold its silence. Locals still say that on some winter nights, when the wind moves through the trees just right, the sound of a distant car engine can be heard fading into the woods, and for a brief second, you can almost believe it's her. Maybe she stopped to breathe, to think, to escape. Maybe someone pulled over and offered help that turned into something else. Or maybe, in that fleeting space between fear and freedom, she simply walked into the dark, never intending to return. What happened to Maura Murray remains one of America's most enduring mysteries. It's a story of unanswered calls, frozen roads, and the fragile distance between running away and being taken. Somewhere, in the snow and silence of New Hampshire, the truth still waits. But until it's found, the question will linger like the cold itself. Where did Maura go that night, and why did the world never see her again?